Okay guys, welcome back to the channel. Why am I sitting down today? Other than to get closer to Marilyn, who's going to join us for this video. No, we're going to play a game of what's wrong with this picture. What can you tell in the background? What's wrong with this? And I'm going to tell you right off the bat, I would never have known for many of my years of being in the hobby. Oh, and it's not this shirt. This is an LP shirt. I actually wear it at the audio shows. Lots of people come up to me and ask me where I got it. Sorry, I didn't make this shirt, unlike the last video. So I don't know where you can get one if you want one. But oh, and speaking of the last video, yeah, it did get more views than my Dendel Hoyt stuff, and seemed like people enjoyed that. So I'll try to do more of that. But quite frankly, I do a little bit more of that in the membership section of the YouTube. And for those that have asked and don't know how to join, if you're a subscriber to my channel, then if you watch one of my videos under the Audiophile Junkie name, there should be a thing that says join. And that's where you can support the channel, become a member, and you'll get access to all these other more private videos that I shoot, fun stuff, as well as kind of the more controversial stuff like that last video, but even more details. And also, I think the most fun, quite frankly, part of the membership section is I also give you a WhatsApp link to join our texting group where we share texts during the day. And just, if you're in I used to live in New Orleans where there wasn't a lot of dealerships or people that were audiophiles. So just having the ability to interact regularly in a texting group is a lot of fun. So if that interests you and that last video interests you, feel free to do that. But getting back to the topic today is something that I'm going to have a lot of audio porn, of fancy gear, Exponas coming up, and I've focused a lot recently on music, but I wanted to get back to another main focus of my mission with this channel is helping people improve what they already have or find budget gear if you can't afford that state-of-the-art stuff and get the same performance or at least similar performance the best you can within your budget. And one thing I've noticed over the years with almost all systems, including at these shows, is that subwoofer setup almost is so poor with most systems that it's a detriment in most cases. I almost feel like I'm listening to two different speakers. And still that bass is, fun and good to have, so people still like it technically. But most people that have subwoofers never reach the true potential of what it can do. And there's a lot of reasons for it, which I'm going to go into one particular one today that I haven't touched on in the past. We've talked about crossovers in the past, DSP, room treatments with bass traps. Those are kind of fairly known, and I've covered that, and other people have covered that. One thing that hasn't been discussed previously, though, is a niche topic I'm going to talk about today with regard to timing. And getting back to what you see in this picture that doesn't make sense. Notice how the subwoofer is behind these main speakers. And notice how that's almost all the time you see with subwoofer setups. They're usually in the corner or behind. They're rarely aligned right up next to your main speakers. And there's some reasons for that. Certainly if you have MBLs, you can't put them right next to it. Certainly from just a real estate standpoint in your room, it's hard to put them somewhere. And then lots of subwoofer makers intentionally say to put them in the corners for bass reinforcement or evening out the bass, or you can do the swarm method, moving them all around. Now, John Hunter with Rel does do a video where he aligns and times the main arrays with the main speakers right up to them. But most people can't do that, and I can't even do that next to the speaker. I don't know how he does it. What I'm talking about, though, is when they're not aligned properly, you get a mistiming of the bass. And so a lot of the brainiacs will say, well, 20 hertz is over 20 feet long. You'd have to be in a huge room to hear that frequency fully at your listening position and notice a timing issue. And I would say they're correct when you're talking about 20 hertz. But when you start going up the scale, all of a sudden these wavelengths quickly get shorter and shorter and shorter. And what most people don't realize is your sub, even though if you cut it off, even at THX 80 hertz, most of them have 12 dB roll off, or at best 24 dB roll off. So if you play test tones with just your sub, turn off your main speakers and amps to it, play just your sub and play test tones, 100, 200, 150, up to 200 hertz, sometimes past 200 hertz, you will actually hear stuff coming from your subwoofer. And those wavelengths are actually quite small, and even at a room distance where I am, very short, there will be mistimings from something that's a foot closer. And so the misperception out there over the years has been subwoofers are slow and you got to find ones with smaller drivers, faster, will mate better with Maggies. How many people have heard that? I've had Maggies over the years and heard that dogma for a lot of times. Oh, you got to get a subwoofer that can keep up with the Maggies. Well, quite frankly, any tweeter is going to be faster than these drivers. You know, you could put any kind of tweeter up against these drivers. It's the same thing. It's not a case of the speed of the driver per se. That's a little bit of the equation. You can get a little bit better performance with 3 small drivers versus 1 big, but there are trade-offs. I've had the Vandersteen sub with 3 8-inch drivers, and I didn't like it compared to this SVS that's 13-inch one. There are trade-offs to that, and I didn't really notice an increase in speed. I played pink noise on both and didn't really notice much at all, test tones and all. So what I started thinking of is what is causing that perception that bass subwoofers are just slow compared to the main speakers. And what I realized once I got the miniDSP SHD and could play around with timing and delays in the signal, is that I realized that even a foot behind your main speakers, those wavelengths that are smaller will hit you at your listening position later than if they were aligned perfectly in a cabinet next to your other drivers. That's why you never see a main speaker in one cabinet put the bass drivers way back. You know, you want them to be somewhat time aligned. And now they don't have to be, you can go overboard and hyper neurotic about it like some do. Vandersteen does it within 1 foot. You know, you can measure an impulse response and time and phase coherency. But what ends up happening is in a room, and if you're not in an exact spot or even 1 foot away, there's so many other things that throw off that timing such that, as I've mentioned in previous videos, I don't really hear that benefit that's noticeable by a measurement device 1 foot away, but in a real life room, I don't really hear it at my listening position. But there are ways to correct the timing at your listening position and for your ears. And using the miniDSP, you can actually delay the timing of these main speakers such that now they will be coincident with the timing of your subwoofer. And what's really cool is I'm going to switch to my listening chair and record a video where I show you how to do it with the miniDSP, and you can prove it to yourself. Again, this is stuff I like to always show you, things that you can prove to yourself. And hear it for yourself. Now, if you don't have the miniDSP, if you have any other tool that will allow you to change the timing, maybe a surround sound processor or something, sometimes the phase on the subwoofer will help you with timing issues, or just do like John Hunter does with the REL, try to align your subwoofer with your main speakers, push it back to the old position, and just A/B test some different test tones or even music. I'm going to show you one piece of music that was clear as day to me once I heard it not timed properly, and then after I did the correction with timing, how much more important that is. So a lot of people say, oh man, didn't you say that timing isn't important with the Vandersteen speakers? But like I said, it's all about what's at your listening position, not sometimes 1 foot away. As I showed in that previous video, sometimes measurements matter. And sometimes, as I showed, at least in my opinion, when PS Audio was showing all these measurements, those measurements are fine, but they're just anecdotal and they don't really apply to what the output was. Same thing here. 1 foot away measurements don't apply to what you're listening to 10 feet away in a real life room. And that's what's the most important thing to getting superior performance that is real. You know, you can buy a theoretically better speaker, or you can have Danny upgrade your speaker to be more flat. But if he corrects something that was already a problem in your room, you could end up with a worse speaker. You know, if he corrects a dip, but your room has a peak in that area, you know, he just made your speaker worse with that upgrade. So you always want to do things in the context of what are the measurements at your listening position, not 1 foot away, and what can you hear subjectively test with music and test tones at your listening position. And a tool like the miniDSP SHD allows you to do things on the fly while the test tones are playing. And also what I'm going to show you is timing is not just for this axis, it's also left, right. Fractions of a millisecond can influence how you perceive the sound stage. It's quite amazing. And I've shown blind tests in the past where a few milliseconds aren't that big a deal in terms of a hi-hat versus a cymbal versus a kick drum, two different instruments playing. But when both frequencies and the instruments playing at the same time and they're misaligned, then your tolerance for 3 milliseconds might go down to 0.25 milliseconds. That's what's really ear-opening to me. And so again, you can prove this stuff to yourself if you have a tool like I'm going to show you. But if you don't have this tool, try doing it just manually yourself, and you'll realize how much timing and alignment of things can impact your sound stage, the tightness of your bass, and a lot of things that you don't have to buy any gear on, and you will get a huge bump in performance. So without further ado, let me pause the video and I'll record one in my listening chair with the miniDSP and show you how I actually did it.
Okay guys, apologize. I'm not going to be looking straight into the camera for most of this. I got to look at my screen. But this is a low budget channel, so you got to deal with my low budget editing and production value here. It's the content that matters, right? And Macho Man t-shirts, right? Anyway, let's get on to the business here. What I wanted to show you was how, at least in the miniDSP SHD, you can adjust timing to set up your main speakers as well as your subs, and how big a difference it can make. And you can prove it to yourself, especially if you have a miniDSP SHD, real time. I'll show you how to do it, and you can see just how powerful and audible this is. Now, if you don't have a miniDSP SHD, if you have any way to adjust in a digital processing way the timing delays of your main speakers, maybe you have a surround sound processor, or you have something that can delay the signal to your main speakers versus your subs. Sometimes the phase calibration on a sub will kind of help in that respect, but again, I can't account for all the different scenarios. That's why I'm such a big fan of this miniDSP SHD, and this is going to show you why right now. But I think either way, whether you have it or not, this can be very valuable. So without further ado, let's take a look at the miniDSP SHD and the setting here that I really didn't touch on in my previous videos. And it's right down here, and it's the delay in milliseconds for each of your channels. And so as you can see at the top, I have left, right, and then my REL and SVS subs. And like I was saying, that basically your subs are always going to be at a disadvantage in terms of timing delay, because they're usually placed behind your main speakers. Very rarely are they lined up exactly with them. Most of the time they're way in the corner, or even if you do a swarm method, you've got a problem where they're all different distances to your listening position. And again, sub frequencies that are really low aren't a problem because the wavelengths are so long to arrive to you. The timing is not a big deal. But play any test tone you want on your sub up into 100, 200, even 250 hertz. You probably will still hear stuff coming from your sub. And so if you're hearing that tone at a different distance than your main speakers playing that same tone, that is what I'm arguing gives a lot of people that muddiness and slowness sound that they attribute to subs, and they just quickly dogmatically say, oh, it's the driver, the big driver, the type of drivers, all this, that, and the other, to fix that. When really all you need to do is, and more precisely what you need to do, is delay your main speakers to the timing difference of your subwoofer. So in my case, I have them about 15, 14 inches behind my main speakers. So that's roughly a little more than a 1 millisecond delay for an average bass frequency. Each one's going to be different. But that's I'm basically delaying, if you look here, zero point 0.9 milliseconds, 0.98 here. And you say, man, didn't you take that blind test where even 3 milliseconds you couldn't hear a difference in that blind test? And that's a great point if you did think about that, because I thought about that too. And what that blind test on that website showed, maybe I'll pop it up, but what that was showing was, can you detect timing between, like, I think it was a cymbal or a hi-hat and then a kick drum? And so those were totally different frequencies playing at a very small millisecond difference in whether you can hear it. And really, when we're hearing music, there's some drummers that aren't even very good with their timing. I did highlight one drummer with, what's that band? Anyway, he was like the atomic clock, the Gorillas. I mean, he was amazing. But some drummers aren't even that great with their timing. So we're not that perceptive and troubled by timing differences between two different frequencies and two different instruments per se. And that's what that blind test was showing. What this is showing is the same frequency from two different drivers. If you play a test tone here, and that's what I do, I usually play a test tone, or you can even play pink noise, but really test tones are what you want to do. And I'll even show you, maybe let me flip here. This is what really, the one song, let me bring it up here and I'll put it on the screen. Let me bring it up here. Oh. Okay, so, I got to show you this part of the screen whenever I change. Let's see here. Okay, so Big Papa by Notorious B.I.G. Here's a song that, again, people say rap music or EDM music isn't good for reference purposes. And for the most part, there is good arguments against it. It's not very much, you can't benchmark in real life some of these, these digital instruments versus an acoustic instrument, where I know a piano, my daughter plays the piano, I listen to Dendo Hoy play the piano. You get in real life a lot more realism and benchmarking with acoustical instruments. But quite frankly, almost all music nowadays has some kind of electronic processing, so it's almost hard to benchmark anything. One thing that rap music does is it has that constant bass note over and over and over again. And so it's almost like playing a test tone. And when you have the same frequency coming from like a 60 hertz tone and those bass notes coming from your sub and your main speaker, and it's not timed properly, it will sound funky. And that impacts your enjoyment of the music, especially a rap music when that bass is kind of out of time with itself. That's really the key part of that song. You want to have that bass impact, tightness. It makes the song more enjoyable. And so a lot of people's rigs, even if they're audiophile rigs, and even if they have mega dollar, rel towers of arrays, if the timing is not right with their main speakers, this song will sound like two different speakers are playing that song at the same time. You will hear a delay in that bass bump in this song. So I just wanted to show you real quick. This is a good test tone type recording to judge if your sub and your main speakers have the right timing. If it doesn't sound tight, taut, and even with that bass, then you probably have a timing delay issue. And that's where this is just one track I wanted to feature and show you in case, prove it to yourself. You can prove it to yourself, all these things that I show you. And that's what I like to do, is always let you prove it to yourself. But getting back to DSP, one thing you can do here, and if you notice, I have not even the same delay from my left and my right channel. The reason being, what's so great about the miniDSP SHD is while music is playing, you can start changing this from 0.9 to 0.10, 0.92, 3, 4, 5, and you will literally hear left-right balance of the soundstage change with super small, even fractions of a millisecond changes. I was like, man, I can't believe they go to the hundredth of a millisecond with this thing. How can anybody can even hear that? Trust me, get this thing and play some music, and you will notice even small adjustments, at least at 0.25 milliseconds, you're going to hear a shift in the in sound stage, most assuredly. And so small differences when you're playing the same notes, the same instrument, that is where timing makes a difference. And so there is a lot of value to being a time coherent and phase coherent speaker 1 foot away. But the reality is when you have subs meeting with main speakers and you have a room bouncing stuff around, the only way for me to get it dead on and proper is me sitting here at my listening position and me tweaking it while I'm listening to music to pop exactly with the timing, right in the middle in terms of both channels are arriving at my ears. So where I got that defined center image, and then the bass notes from my sub that's a little further back from my main speakers, both of those are hitting me at the same time. I don't have any of that muddiness, any of that delay. It sounds like I'm listening to one speaker combined, which is very tough to do when you have subs. Almost every, I mean, in most cases, I would say a sub is a detriment to most people's systems because not only do they not get this part right, this is even more advanced, they don't get the crossover point right and they don't get the phase and all that other stuff right. But this right here is where I really can tell the super high-end sub setups from, you know, the good to the average and the poor. And so just want to give you this little tip here. Somehow, some way, if you don't have miniDSP SHD, you can go to my audiophile.com website and see some of the miniDSP products. Other ones will probably give you the same advantage. And also, I think the Dirac will give you this advantage. But if you can just move your speakers to be even with each other and do it like Rel kind of did with their array and aligning the array with their floor standards. That was a very important part of John Hunter's setup. Again, he wasn't doing it from the listening position. I don't know how he does it by ear that way, but just visually, they're both aligned closer such that you probably wouldn't have that delay. Just try it with your subwoofer if you don't have this. Move your subwoofer even with your floor standing speakers and then play that track with it in the previous position to in that position and see if you don't notice a difference. And if you've got this, try it as soon as you can, and you're going to see exactly what I see, how small millisecond, fractions of a millisecond delay can change presentation left, right, and timing. Hopefully you enjoyed, guys. If you did, sign up, subscribe, because I'll have plenty more good stuff like this coming soon.